All right, well, thank you for inviting us. We really appreciate the opportunity to present in front of you, and the opportunity to submit a proposal. We are the Water's Edge team. Some of you may, I don't know, any of you heard of us before or not? I know we've had some history with the big pool. Some of you may be familiar with us. I haven't been as involved in the past projects with the big pool, but some behind the scene, but some not directly with you on those. So together we put together what we think is a really good team specifically for your project. And Water's Edge is an engineering company that specializes exclusively on aquatic centers for communities like you. The vast majority of our work are outdoor facilities for communities. But with us, we have Stuart Nelson with GMCN. He's here to provide the building architecture for things we need. We also have other team members, other firms. We have Awesome Brown consulting engineers that would do mechanical, electrical, plumbing design for a project. So that's our core team. There might be some minor team members here and there that are involved, but we are the core group that would see this from beginning to end. Some introductions. I'll start myself. I'm an engineer with Water's Edge. I'm a principal engineer and one of the owners of Water's Edge. I'm an engineer by training. I have both a bachelor's and master's degree in engineering and focused on hydraulic design, which is really important for swimming pools and aquatic centers. So I've been designing facilities since '93, so it makes it about 25 years. So in spite of my boyish face, I've been doing this a while. And with me,
Yeah, my name is Loren Osburgh. I am not an engineer. I formerly worked for municipal government, local agencies out of Kansas City, as the on-deck supervisor and operator for aquatic venues for several agencies up there. So my role in your project team is I help with planning and the operational perspective for your on-deck staff and for the owner. And that is my role for you. And I also, in addition to that, I participate in swimming throughout the state of Kansas. So I will work with you and I work with other agencies on what is happening at your facility, your programming, your activities, and then, like I said, helping your on-deck staff.
All right, I'm Jeremy Harder. I'm a professional engineer and project manager at Water's Edge. The kind of support staff through the planning phases of the project have been more heavily involved in the design through construction.
And I'm Stuart Nelson. I'm the owner of GMCN Architects. I recognize a lot of faces here. For those of you I don't know, I've been in the business longer than I care to admit. But most of, in fact, out of college, I came back to work in Garden City, so I've seen Garden City change a lot through the years, and especially the big pool. It's gone through a lot of changes, so I'm excited about that.
okay, a little bit about us. Again, we're an engineering firm that specializes just in aquatic features, aquatic centers. We're very experienced. We're nationally involved. We do facilities across the country. The majority of them are here in the Midwest, based out of Kansas City. We're capable engineers. We consider ourselves, pride ourselves on being problem solvers. And then again, Loren mentioned we have operators in our staff, which is unique to an engineering firm. Have people are experienced with actually operating facilities. She didn't mention right now we're helping a really cool story. We have a facility really close to our office that we designed a new therapy pools for kids with special needs, 2 small indoor therapy pools, and they're very close to our heart. I have a son that went through the program a few years back, and we are helping them. We designed a new facility for them, and we are currently helping them operate that. So, and Lauren's the point person on that, so she's there a lot, heavily involved with making sure the operations are going well, everything's going for them. So a lot of experience, not just in the engineering plan design, but also the operations side of that, which is real good at. It's a great asset.
May I interrupt you just real quick?
Yeah.
For the panel here, our presentation doesn't exactly follow your questions in the order that you have them listed. So just so you know, and I know it's a little hard to see maybe from your distance, but we have labeled the slides for the questions that we're trying to answer, because we do bob around just a little bit. If you're not sure, just like Jennifer said, just stop us and one of us will tell you which question we're trying to answer. Some slides have comboed multiple questions. So before we continue, I just wanted to tell the panel that.
So we have, with our experience, we have, so we formed in 2000, and we were engineers from another company, so our staff dates before that even, but we've completed 667 projects, which involve designs of facilities and studies, feasibility studies and such, and approximately half of those studies turned into some form of design or renovation projects. So, and these are the typical projects, categories we do: spray grounds, indoor pools, outdoor facilities, improvements, so renovated facilities, and then again, studies, feasibility studies and planning. We're very proud of the facilities that we've designed. We take a collaborative approach with the communities, so we're proud of that we don't believe our facilities are replicated. We're not cookie cutter type engineers where we do the same facility over and over. Every facility is unique to the community that we design them for, and with that, we've been recognized with quite a few awards for the facilities we've designed, so we're extremely proud of that. I don't know if anybody probably don't get Aquatics International, but that's a national periodical dedicated to water park and aquatics facilities. So our understanding of the project, one of the things is we want to help you grow. We've been involved. This is a listing, I don't know if you saw it in the proposal, but it's a listing of times that we've assisted you, say in the past 20 years. It started in 2002 with evaluating the big pool and helping create a master plan for it, all the way down to as recently as last year, trying to deal with the new Kansas Amusement Right Act. And I actually met Jacob during that process, so helping you get through that.
To answer the direct question that you asked us, why did we submit for this proposal? Yes, we've worked with you before, but that's not why we submitted to you. We submitted to you because the history and the nostalgia that comes with the big pool is something that attracts us to your project. So that was one of the major items that was of interest to us. And the second thing that was of major interest to us was the active community involvement, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit, but also the city's support of this project. The efforts that have been put in by the city up until this point is highly attractive to this team and something we want to participate in. So again, thank you for inviting us, because those are very exciting things for us as we enter into a project like this.
So again, our understanding?
Yeah, so the world grows here. We can interpret that and extrapolate that to be all sorts of different things. But to us, that means we are building a community to go out and do the things they are meant to do. That's how we interpret the world grows here, and that's absolutely true. So your existing facility is approximately 70,000 square feet. It's a large facility. We know that. Your history began back in the 20s. And we're going to talk a little bit more about history later, like I said, but you've had 3 major periods of time in which this facility has had an evolution. Okay, so we understand that, but you have a long time history here. We understand that you have some major maintenance items. One of those items being pipes that are leaking and struggling to get that corrected. And tied to that is a high expenditure because of that and the ongoing maintenance. So what does that mean? Our cost recovery is not quite what we want. So we understand that, and also the decreasing attendance over the years, and we understand that you have approximately 300 people a day. When we look at the square footage and we think of 300 people coming in a day on average, again, we can understand why we're sitting around the table today. Existing programs, you have quite a few activities that are going on, and it's very evident that you are trying to get people into this pool. So as we go into your planning, as we go into your design, and ultimately opening your doors, these are the different types of activities that we understand that we have to think about and coordinate with you and with your community to ensure that these things can continue, but also plan for those things that are going to be new and different, that may or may not have a design consideration. I do want to kind of focus right here, because the amount of special events and special activities you offer to include more people and to get more people through your door is really commendable. So again, we understand that these are the programs we need to be thinking about. And a few things that come to mind when we look at this list are going to be open swimming. In addition to a swim team, there's some considerations there that are different from each other. some that are similar, but there are considerations as well. Same with lap swimming and these types of rentable types of activities. So there's some considerations that come through there as well. Real quick recap on your public engagement. Again, we recognize that the public engagement done up until this point is substantial, it is important, and it's been very well done. So kudos to the city on that. Between going to the schools and talking to the students, going to your civic groups, trying to engage a multitude of people on a variety of platforms, the 3 surveys that were done, 2 through the schools, 1 with the general community. Again, we recognize that quite a bit of work and effort has been produced or has been conducted up until this point. It's how we were able to give you the concepts that we did. Statistically, you talk to a lot of people, a good chunk of those people never utilize the big pool. That's what it boils down to, and there's some themes that came out of that. You have people who are traveling consistently to Holcomb, Parrot Cove, Dodge, City, Liberal. Of note, we have worked with about 3 out of the 4 of them. 1 we're in an active planning project on right now, and that's with Liberal. We know that your community is interested in more amenities, and that's why they are going to these places, because there are some differences between Garden City, big pool, and these other pools. So amenities is 1. There is overall support for an aquatic facility of some kind. We understand that. And there's also support to fund this type of project through user fees or the existing tax base, and maybe not quite as much support for a new tax for the development of a project like this.
All right, so you asked us to create a couple concepts, and I think I mentioned to Jennifer, and preface this with, we really hate to create concepts in a vacuum without sitting with you. We're a very collaborative firm, so I want to keep that in mind, that we created them. We're not in love with any one of them. There are definitely things that you'll have priorities and things and interests that will greatly affect or impact anything that we've created. So with that in mind, I hope you give me feedback and we can talk about those, but we'll start first with your, so we know, obviously we're very familiar with the big pool on the site, and we know how it's evolved over time. Used to be, just the big rectangle, and I've always understood, Dave Schwartz, if you remember him, he's our partner who did a lot of the early master planning, and he always described how this started as a big mud pit that they had dug out by horse and I forget what horse and slip. That's how they initially started it. And I don't know if it's right or wrong, but he explained why you, like for an engineer, why would you have a rectangle that's not really a square corner? And explained that was part of the process, that because of that method, it wasn't exactly square. Could be a wives' tale, could be real truth to that, but I always found that fascinating. And then I think the next step, they lined the concrete walls first, and then it was still mud bottom facility, and then eventually filled in the floor. So it's evolved over time, and then eventually added piping and filter systems and such. So we understand it's kind of evolved over time, and then they added, we actually helped design the wading pool back in the day. I think that was 2003, 2004. We designed that for you. We did create a master plan, and then you guys, with our master plan, and added the water slide and the spray park, splash park there. So we understand how it's evolved. The way the site's laid out, you have the parking that's over on the west. Interesting, typical character of pools that are older. I don't know why, but they never put the bathhouse at the entrance. They always walked around the pool to go into the building, where nowadays it seems to be a common trend that you park and then the building greets you and invites you into the facility, but not how they were done back then. So you actually park to the side and then circle around the facility. And then you have your filter equipment all on the southeast. So with that said, moving in, we created the first concept. Jeremy's gonna share it with you, but focus on the first one. Stemmed a lot from the what we saw in the survey with the request for certain amenities, features like water slides and lazy rivers. So of the 2 concepts, I don't know if you noticed that, but 2 concepts were created. One, they each had a kind of a focus in different areas, and this one was more of a focus on kind of the recreation side. So
Sure, so jumping into this concept, layout of this, we shifted the bathhouse to the west, adjacent to the existing parking, to give it a more modern feel. Approaching the building, coming through the entrance, you're greeted immediately by features, the more family-friendly areas for the young kids being.
I'm gonna scroll in front of you. Overall, just you can see the different spaces and that we identified there, but I think we had
Sure.
we just had this done, crude rendering of what that concept is that gives a little better read than just the bird's eye view.
Sure, and that concept's also on the left side on this stand over here, if you want to reference back to that. But again, looking northeast from here, entrance through the bathhouse, immediately into the shallow water area for the young kids. Play structure off to the north, kind of in the area where the existing bathhouse is right now, to attract those young kids and allow congregation of kind of the family area there, along with the concession stands. Moving further into the facility, you get more into the deep water spaces. Lap pool on further to the east. We show it contiguous with the beach entry wading pool. Another consideration would be to peel that off into a separate basin, but that would come with some added costs as you would need the mechanical equipment to support a separate basin. Small slide structures in the lap pool. Moving further away, we have the lazy river and big slide package tower with the plunge pool associated with that. Snuck back behind, we are showing the flow rider, as I think that was kind of a dream of some of the survey responses. So showed that tucked back in there. And on the concept, we just kind of dashed as kind of a future consideration as we've come back into the facilities before and added that flow rider in sometime later. Just some more close-up images to give you a flavor of what these different spaces could look like. A concession area with a multi-tiered shade structure to give it a little bit more interest. The beach entry shallow area, small sprays, taller slides, shade structures with benches to keep the kids entertained and their parent if they're there watching them, to give them some shade and somewhere to hang out. Interesting feature down here is a wet bubble, which we've done on a recent project in Sabetha, Kansas. Interesting, unique feature, gives something really iconic that people will bring people into the area.
It was
which we show in the middle.
Yeah, and I'll make a point about that. It's that, like other features, you know, with aquatic centers, water parks, you're looking for features that have been proven to be popular and exciting, and a lot of them are ones that have some history, you have familiarity, you know what you're getting into. This was unusual in that it hasn't been installed a lot, so it's kind of first in the area. So with that comes a lot of research. We do a lot of research on that, and that's not just us, but with you as well. So with this, we had another community that had one, and we interviewed the staff, and one of the things they said was, that's the #1 feature on the list. The public loves it, and it's the #1 feature on our maintenance staff because they all hate it. It's the most hated thing. And so we did a bunch of research. Well, why do they hate it? Went through all that stuff. And what we found is we found ways that, you know, we could overcome the issues they were having. If we changed the design of it, we did, you know, certain adaptations to it, they could have it without all the maintenance headaches that they were having at this other facility. We managed to do that, and Sabetha has it. And again, it's a huge hit. It's #1 feature at that aquatic center for them, and we've been able to circumvent or get rid of a lot of the maintenance issues. So a lot of this process for that is finding those features and you know, what's interesting, what's been tried and true versus what's different that you might want to consider, but what are the potential implications of those new features that haven't been tried. So, sorry.
Sure, nope, you're good. We'll jump across play structure shown on the north end of the site. Attracts the younger kids getting up in age a little bit. And also, conveniently enough, eases up on staff because you don't have that body of water requiring the lifeguarding. Middle picture just reflecting some shades and some lounging areas. I know the existing facility doesn't have a lot of shades, so we'd like to incorporate that and to get those spaces throughout the facility. And then that top right picture is just an example of kind of a private little area where you could partition off if need be for some rental spaces and whatnot.
And the point I added that in there is the point is that shade could be more of this conventional lining it, but you could also put smaller, trend is to take smaller shade areas and kind of separate them a little more, instead of just being all lined up on the deck, but a little more partition area, and then you can have those for rentals. And it becomes another source of revenue for you, where people can rent those if they want, or just a great space for families to congregate and not feel like they're in the fray of everyone else, so.
Alrighty, and then getting into the deeper areas, shown on an example of a lazy river, which I'm sure the majority of you are familiar with. Those shade structures, again, for the rental spaces or just family spaces on down to the south, as well as around the perimeter of the concept, as you can see. Bottom right, just showing a slide complex, example slide complex that would be placed where those flumes would enter into the plunge area. Middle picture, a flow rider, it's a surf machine, if you're not familiar with them. And then top picture is showing kind of a bench area of a pool, but shown in our concept here is more of a easier transition area into the lazy river for those entering, riding the tubes. We showed some wider landing areas for them to get them some comfort level of getting into their tubes and getting situated, and then onto the river.
And I have a few things to add. In reviewing your public engagement feedback, there's really 3 things that trended across all your feedback, and you're going to see it in both of our concepts. And there's 3. The first one is these water park amenities, and both concepts are incorporating the water park amenities. The other 2 I really want to focus on are spaces for people to congregate and be together. We heard it over and over again. We want to do things together. We want to have our friends together. And your pool right now, it's lacking some of that. The shade and the seating are a few examples. So consciously, we try to group things together that would allow people to do that. The third thing is, we heard over and over, especially from families, I have multiple children. I cannot watch them safely. And right now, with your wading pool and your main body of water really being separated, that's understandable why they feel that way. So in this particular one, when we group all this up here together, those kids who really need more supervision, particularly from their parents, it puts them together. And even by putting this pool right here with the diving board, the kids who are just a little bit older but who still might need, some good supervision, it's all grouped together right there. So those were 3 themes that really came out, and we tried to be conscious when we started grouping these things together.
So curious, now's your chance.
The thing that sticks out to me the most about this is the moving of the bathhouse, for multiple reasons. One, the sheer cost of moving that bathhouse because of when it was built and how it was built is probably going to be a major problem. I also think that when we looked at this initially, trying to figure out ways and things that we could do to preserve the history, we kind of felt like somebody else had already taken away the history of the actual shape of the iconic water piece of it, but nobody really had changed the bathhouse. When you go in there, it's all pretty much the same. The only thing we did was paint the mural on the outside, which was really a piece of the iconic nature of the elephant swimming and the zoo connection and all of that. But I think if you move that bathhouse, at least from what I feel like touched the community, I feel like there would be a major outcry for taking away all, like that's it, you ruined it for me. I could be wrong because I didn't grow up here, but I think that might spark a lot of people in the wrong way. And it's the first, as soon as this design popped up on here, I was like, oh God, I might have a heart attack. And so that's what I think of. I don't know what everybody else.
I don't disagree with that, and I think a lot of things, you still see that a lot of times. You go into Chicago and places like that, even though they've done obvious enhancements to the ballpark, for instance, they leave those iconic pieces the way they are. And Stuart would speak to that. We have a history of doing that. We moved arches, for gosh sakes, from a gymnasium because they meant something to this community and put them in our zoo. So yeah, I'm with her. Put bathhouse back, and then I can look at the rest of it.
I'll tell you, I agree with you.
I think
I'll agree with you.
the problem is with the existing bathhouse is how do we make that a functional piece for the needs of participants and people entering in today. i.e. family restrooms, it's not, there's gonna have to be a major.
Okay.
I don't know that it
Hold
has
that
to.
up.
Okay.
I don't
Hold
think
that up. Yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
We don't think it has
We'll
to
get
serve
there.
that purpose.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
Yeah, there'll be time for that.
Okay.
There's not a gym behind
Does
the
anybody else have any thoughts on the
either.
design besides us?
And this is
bringing
where,
up
this
about
is where I
that?
say, did I forget to mention, which I did, that a big part of concept planning is showing what doesn't work, so you know what you like and what you don't like. So a lot of what we do in concept planning is you blow down a lot of ideas, and this is a great example of, we show something, this is what, this really was, responding to what if we started and we just did all new, and we created it, and all that sentiment about the building is, I agree with that, exactly, and I would not, and that would be a comment I would make, and I wouldn't, I'd factor that in as we're doing that concept.
I'd be with the rec though. If you look at the plumbing of the swimming pool,
Yeah.
go look at the plumbing in the
Yep.
building. It's
Yes.
just as bad or worse.
Yep, and we'll get to that.
So-
Speaking of plumbing, the other thing that I would be concerned about is the fact that your zero depth entry is connected with the lap pool.
Yes, for
And
sure.
when something happens in that zero depth entry,
It does,
i.e.
yep.
poo,
Yep.
we're gonna have to shut down both
And it
of
mentioned,
them.
and Jeremy
We didn't
mentioned,
think that
yeah.
happened in Garden City.
Not only that, the safety factor with it connected, where you have is
Little
right
kids.
next to it.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought, because that's always been our conventional logic, that you have zero depth entry, and if we take away that area from the shallow pool, then it makes it safer, but an interesting phenomenon we've discovered is, and Jeremy mentioned this, we could easily take this pool and we split that apart, so we now have a 3-pool concept, and we have a lot of those to show to you. But one interesting phenomenon that we discovered is that when you have a zero depth entry pool that goes from 0 depth down to 3 feet, parents view those differently than it's connected to the pool. And we have 2 facilities in West Des Moines, Iowa. One is this facility, another one is 3 pools or separate shallow pool, and they have more rescues from that separate shallow pool that goes from 0 to 3 foot than they have on the other pool, because it's strictly because of the mindset of the parents that they're there, this is a kiddie play pool, and they don't watch their kids. And they go to the other facility, then they keep a closer watch on them. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong why you do it, but I wanted to share that as kind of a weird phenomenon we've discovered.
And I have personal experience with that. I had a pool that went from 0 depth down to about 18 inches with a body of water 3.5, not too far from that. It was my highest incident rate location for that exact reason. Yeah. So it's interesting that you bring, that concern up, because that's what you'd think naturally.
I do have a question on, I noticed the layout changed a little bit and there's a 50-yard pool now
Sure.
on that, so.
Well, yes.
Would that be something that,
That could be designed in from the beginning, or it could be added later.
okay.
And simply what we had done is, whether it's right or wrong, I was targeting, and I had conversations with Jennifer, and I was targeting what I thought was kind of a budget threshold.
But that could be an add-on.
It could be added, it's gonna add extra cost to it. What I was doing was responding at first, to the survey. If you responded, I think, strictly to the survey and weren't paying attention to the swim programs, then you do this. You have competitive swimming, but it's short course, and you put your budget on recreational activities. And that's what this facility focuses on, but it has room to expand. I'm not saying that's the right answer, but it's the way this one's approached. You could expand it. It adds more cost to what, the 9 or 10 million that we projected for this one. And I have an example of a weird one to show you later, where we did add it later, expand it. It goes into, were we done talking about that? Sorry, I like moving on without, okay? So for some case examples, Ankeny, Iowa, this was, you asked the question, have we done stuff like this before? We've done a lot of this kind of stuff. This one's 3-pool concept, like you were suggesting. We separated, this case, we separated this shallow leisure pool from the lap area. There's quite a bit of difference. This is a fantastic facility, 21,400 square foot, lots of different spaces, lots of activities, slides, lazy river, etc.
Surf machine.
It does have the surf
machine.
Does have the surf machine, yes. Now this one was entirely donated by one individual, so if you just find your find that person here, then away we go.
Yeah, okay. We'll call that guy real quick.
Yeah.
Need his number?
I got it.
Yeah, this guy donated, he's a developer up there, or his daughter's development, and he had 10 acres that he donated to the city and the school district, and then donated money for the water park. And then they built the school and the water park right there, and then his daughter started selling all the homes, started developing and building homes all around it, so that's how he worked that. And this is, these are the numbers, so attendance, 104,000 seasonal attendance, fantastic. It's an expensive place to run because it has lots of stuff on it, but the revenue is even higher. It's 123% cost recovery.
What if they're charging?
I don't have that with me today.
I want to say it's probably in the $8 range for adults, so.
Well,
Like $6,
Oh, yeah,
$5, $6 for kids.
If you're interested in that, we can provide that type of breakdown too. And I do want to comment, what the case examples we're showing you, they were pulled for a particular reason. It either had to do with the population of the community or the amenities and the features and the size of the facility that we're looking at, or a combination of both. So we have begun to do a little bit of market research for you on a preliminary basis. So that's why we're showing you these case examples.
And that's a good point, because we haven't done, part of this process is market study and doing this analysis on projecting what the attendance, what the revenue will do. And we have to do that based on identifying other facilities with like conditions so that we can predict what that attendance and what that revenue might be. The expenses, pretty easy. You have a facility, you have to staff it, you know what those costs are. But the challenge is attendance and the revenue. So this is a process we'll go through identifying these facilities and using these to help project what your facility financial operations will be. So here's the one, Cedar Falls. This is the one I was telling you is kind of weird in that the original design and construction, 3 bodies of water, and the lap pool was a short course, L-shaped lap pool. This part didn't exist. So we designed it with this. There was a lot of interest. They had a really strong swim team. There was a lot of interest in doing a 50-meter facility. They didn't have the money for it at the time it was designed and built. We made some changes to the design to leave room for it, but after second year, I think, first or second year of operation, they came back and said, well, we have the money, and this place is so crowded that we want to expand it, and we want to expand it for the 50-meter, and we also want to fix, this area is way too crowded, we want to add some more shallow water to try to relieve that space. So after the second year, we went back in and saw cut the whole end of the brand new pool, which is, could be a little nerving for some people, but saw cut, brand new pool, and then extended it out, expanded it, so it's possible.
So that's their cool down, is that a cool down pool there, and then that can also be used for some overflow swimming area, or?
This is overflow area. They don't have a lot of like cool down area. They have this lane off to the side that they use for that, so. And they're very aggressive on the programming, on the programs, things they do. So they operate at a fantastic revenue basis. So they're again also way up in the cost recovery, high cost recovery. They're a slightly larger community than you are, but they have a pretty decent radius, like population base.
What did that one cost to build? You didn't have it on the first
I
thing?
didn't, because this one is,
2006.
this one's ancient by now.
Yeah, but I was just
And I
curious.
started, it was like 6 million-ish back then.
Sure.
So, I started to project it to today, and I was gonna put like, say, 4% inflation through it, but then there were a couple years that were down and a couple years up, and I didn't try
That's
to
fine.
assign it.
That's fine.
And that's something we can use, like provide to you too.
Yes. And they all have, interesting enough, there's a big range on, for where, based on the amenities and things, there's a pretty good range on what that, same size facility might cost quite a bit different. This is Long Branch Lagoon. You familiar with that one? We designed that one. It's been open in a few years now. So it's a fantastic facility, it's huge. Has a lot of fun stuff on it. Has the separate zero depth entry leisure pool, kind of shallow play pool. Has a lazy river complex with beach entry and wave pool in it. And then this water slide tower with this interesting boomerango water slide. Has anybody been on the boomerango?
No, what's that?
You climb the tower, you're right on the tube, and you slide down this. It starts as an enclosed slide, picks up some speed, drops in like a speed slide drop section, and then it banks up this wall, and then comes back out into the.
You gotta go? You need to leave? Head to that? Okay.
Don't we
Too
all?
old for that stuff.
You got your trunks on, right?
I'm with you. And then they have a full 50 meter by 25 yard competition tank that's separated with a few slides on it.
Something to note about Dodge too is the historical value and the iconic status of your facility. That's going to be important for you in Dodge. The theming and the history of Dodge was incorporated into this pool. So when we think about incorporating your history, Dodge did. It's not the same story, but it was the same type of process of having to figure that out and how they wanted to incorporate that.
So there's the numbers on that.
And that's for
See,
2017, a year. It's a second year in operation here.
The first year of operation, this is something that we need to dig into, but the first year attendance was really through the roof, really high. And then,
80,000 approximately.
What are they anticipating their cost recovery to balance out to? Because when it's brand new, everybody's coming. As they age, did they set up a goal for their cost recovery?
I'm not.
You know, I'm
Or
not.
subsidy?
I'm not sure. I wasn't the project manager on it. Dave was, but that's a good question. I don't know what their initial goal was. Of course, they have the casino that generates the funds for it, and their primary goal was to make it a tourist destination, to try to attract people to come there. But that's a good question on what their initial goals were. They're operating about 88-90% cost recovery.
I think
last
it's
year.
actually a why not Dodge
It is, it's
funded,
a way.
yeah, so it's a
It
sales
is,
tax
Okay.
funded, not
Not this
casino.
casino?
Unless they
Okay.
got- did they get
I
an
misstated
IRA
that then.
funds for it?
I don't think
No,
so.
it's a why not Dodge project, it's a sales tax project that doesn't ever sunset.
Does the casino pays for the, maybe I'm mistaken that the
Casino
sales
came
tax.
after they did
base-
their sales
The
tax.
sales tax did it, okay.
Sales tax has been in place for years.
All right, then Norman, Oklahoma, three pool complex. Again, as one of you suggested, separated out leisure pool from the lap pool. It has 50 meter competition tank, lazy river. So similar to what we're looking at.
I'd like to point something out here. So we know that competitive swimming is likely going to be a consideration for your facility. I actually wanted to point out this fence right here that can also work on another body of water too. So if you know that you want to have the swim team come through, you want to have major events, and we need to think through how might we be able to keep some part of the facility operational while we have these major events, something like separating it is an option for you. I'm pointing it out here because you can actually see the fence around that little body, but also around this wet deck as well. So it's a consideration maybe for your competitive swimming and or your shallow water pool.
Is anybody connected with the competitive swimming program? No?
What kind of, is there something that's a temporary system that you could put in place
Sure.
for the event?
Sure.
Do you have applications for that,
Yeah.
materials?
Yeah, it
It's
could be-
easy to move and store.
Yeah, well, it could be simply the systems you see, say like at movie theaters, that kind of stuff. There's also, we've done it where you put stanchions in the deck. It's simple as you put, the anchors in the deck and then you come out and put the pulls in,
Yeah.
and stretch the rope across.
Well, this looks like a similar footprint size, even bigger than Long Branch and Dodge. Why was Dodge's 50% higher, or roughly 50% higher for the cost?
I think there's a couple things at play. One is the availability of pool contractors relative to that location. The other is the process at which they had it built. There are different delivery methods. Whether it's this was a competitively bid project, and because of that, I think they got pretty competitive prices. Dodge was a construction management, so the contractor was selected And so most of, in my mind, the prices were negotiated, they priced it versus competing or competitively bidding against their peers. So I think that factored in as well. So those two, I think, were the main factors. But that's a good point, because you could have, there's a lot of factors that go into each one of these, the costs and how you want to, and I don't know if you've gotten to that point where you've talked about what approach you want to take to get the facility built. But that's, if you haven't talked about it, that's something that you'll be talking about tonight. The Bay, Kansas City. This is a facility, again, similar size, slightly smaller in footprint than the concept plan that we had created for you. But it had, again, shallow play pool, separate wading pool, or separate lap pool, and then the lazy river with the water slide complex, and then of course we cut off, it also had a flow rider, and it was designed with that to be added in the future. So like we master planned spot for it, that was the same for this facility. They master planned it in, and then it was added a few years later. So moving on, concept B. So I talked about the first one was focusing a lot on the leisure recreation was the primary focus. This one is, what if we, say, given the same budget as the one you saw before, what if we put more emphasis or focus on the competitive pool side of it, and trimmed, and in effect you would end up kind of transitioning some of the resources and money for the recreation part towards the competitive facility part. We also, again, this option, we preserved the building. We kept it in that location. To answer your question, somebody had the question, what about the existing building? What about its function? There are issues with the function. They didn't design bathhouses back then like we like to use them now. And we understand that. So a lot of what we do when we're restoring, utilizing an existing building, is you end up building, a lot of times building new space right next to it that provides that space you're lacking. For example, and in essence, you've done that to some degree, because you put a small building here, and you're using that for your entry. And you're not selling concessions out, right? But it's just the entry point. So you pulled that apart so that you don't have to, your families don't have to separate by gender to go through the bathhouse, right? I think that's probably why you added that building, so your families can go right through together on deck, and then they can circle back through for the bathhouse. So in this scheme, we put that building separately. That could be, for example, we're maintaining this parking area. You can put the entry off of that building, so that new building can provide that ticket entry, can provide concession stand, and staff spaces if you want. So those are 3 spaces that, and it could provide family change rooms as well. Or it opens up the possibility to reorganize some of this space where you have like the lifeguard rooms and what was the ticket counter there. You can reorganize that and use that for other spaces, whether it's simply a locker area, or we have converted those areas to family change rooms. So in this scheme, if we utilize that building, we can keep that building and make it functional for you.
I want to add something here too. Jeff started this whole thing is that we're very collaborative, and this is an example of that collaborative process. The more I looked at this, and I went out to your site this morning for the first time, and I was looking at the zoo and the museum location and the ball fields that are on the east side, and the synergy that is happening at that location. And I'm thinking about this new facility and the historical value of your bathhouse and some of the activities people have started to say that they would like to see. An idea that kind of started to get kicked around is, what about the concept of these rentable party rooms? You have ample space, you have a tremendous park. Could a building or either the existing or a new space serve some sort of function like that, which led to conversations about the splash pad and the wet deck. And again, it's going back to how might you bring this synergy back to this facility. So again, if you have ideas on that, we certainly want to hear that about this layout in particular.
So quickly through it, there's a lot of similar amenities. we have that wet deck splash area. We have the shallow pool, and in this case, we've tucked all that, again, close to the building and entry. And in this case, we've taken the lap pool, we pushed it off to the south. As Loren mentioned before, you can even barrier that off and fence that off to where when you have events and activities there, then you have access to that, entrance to that, and the swim events, competitions can happen there while the rest of the facility is still open. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Derby, Rock River Rapids in Derby, Kansas, outside of Wichita. You might be if you're part of the competitive swim community, but that's the setup we designed for them down there. So, and again, similar, you'll see similar pictures. You know, the separate building, some of those amenities. So what about initial thoughts, comments that you guys had on that one? And there might be, a common thing is, there are pieces that you hate about each one of them, things that you might like about both of them, or if we were doing this process, we would come with a lot more concepts and ideas, and you start to blend. We like this, we don't like this, and then it starts to evolve into your community.
I think the biggest thing I take away from this one is that it seems underwhelming for the person who might be coming to do it. I think it's great for our competition swimmers, and I think we need to provide that service to them. But the rest of the park, I feel like leaves lacking. I feel like if you're under maybe 8 or 9 years old, you're probably not gonna show up and participate in anything. Or your parents are gonna bring you in, you'll be there for an hour and you wanna go home because you're bored. I don't know, that's my first.
Yeah, I agree. I think, you can accomplish the competition swimming while incorporating more recreational oriented ideas that will actually engage participation more, while still just making sure that you provide the required space for the swim meets and swim lessons, or in the swim practices.
I also think that there's something to be said for, so a lot of the stuff we've looked at, and this is kind of off topic but sort of related, a lot of the stuff we've seen and looked at has been these ideas or concepts that there's 2 or 3 pools, and I get the idea that's what you see in these water park concepts. But I really think that true to the big pool, people want to see these features coming together. They want to see these features, I think that's what the survey said, but they want to also see this like larger swimming area, because I think the thing they take away from the big pool is, well, I don't feel like 2 other people are standing right next to me, or I don't feel like it's overcrowded. And I definitely think that if they came to this, they probably younger families would feel sort of crowded.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting, so keeping that in mind, maybe instead of, we have spaces identified, whether they're the right spaces or not. We have shallow water, we have lazy river, we have competition tank, we have wet deck, and we've been, the concepts are arranging those, moving those around. So to your point, maybe it's something where this isn't standalone, then maybe the shallow part that we had connected to lazy river actually becomes part of the main tank, whatever that. It's kind of like, well, that's how it was on the first one.
Kind of like if the
It
main
was
tank was turned around
Yeah.
and the slides and stuff were brought up closer into the
Yeah.
activity area,
Yeah.
then it probably would make that the center of it. I think what Jennifer is saying is when you look at this, and again,
Yeah.
this is really early to even have a comment.
Right,
but I
right,
think-
right.
But I think, your eye is drawn to the middle of that complex, and if you had like your slide structures and stuff turned to where they were brought up into the middle of where everything else is happening, it probably would make that look more active. Because there are some smaller slide structures off of the competition pool.
Yes.
That's a climbing
actually-
wall, isn't it?
And then
That's what?
there's a climbing wall.
Well, actually, yeah, what I'll
Which is
show
cool.
is, here's the features. So you're right, so these are the features similar to what we had on the leisure pool. That's the water slide complex there. For the deep tank, so one of the things is if you're gonna do a competitive big tank, you don't want it just to be for competition, it needs to be multi-purpose. So in this case, what we do if we have a big tank is the swimmers want deep water on the ends especially. So in this pool, we have the diving tank on one end, that takes care of deep water. We have a little bit of deep water on this end, and then what we do is bring the floor up so the center of it's shallow. So this is all about 3 to 3.5 foot deep water where it's more usable to the community than just one big honking deep water pool. And with that, then you start introducing some play value in that, so it's not, so like the water slides, there's a bench. We have a bench on this one. This one we have a long roll off to the side, so some floatables, things like that are good in this space. And then the climbing wall is good for the deep water area. So that's how we would manage that. And then the question, I'm just gonna jump into the next part, but the question is, have you designed something like this before? Actually, the concept I had in there, I stole a lot from a facility I already designed, and this is down in Joplin, Missouri. And it's very similar to that facility. The shallow part of that and the competition tank are similar. Another interesting thing, back to the bathhouse discussion, this is a WPA facility that was gender split entry, it wasn't functional for them. So again, we added a separate building to provide those spaces that they were missing for a modern aquatic center. And we didn't ruin, say, the character of the existing building. Okay. So that each one of those, the intention, and we're giving conservative, we're doing budgeting, so we're trying to give conservative budgeting estimates for these. As we get into more detail, hopefully you can create the concept and the budget would come down a little bit from that, but at this point, we're trying to give a nice conservative budget, taking historical data from the past facilities, projecting it out. We're at least a year or two, I assume, out from your facility, so we're trying to be conservative in that way. So next question, what you asked about enclosed facilities, that was your question number 5, right? Is our team capable of designing indoor enclosed facilities? Well, we designed Parrot Cove right here, and that's pretty complex auditorium right there. That's as complex as I think you're gonna get for facilities. So together, we worked for Stewart on that one. Together we designed that space. So I like to show that as just our check mark on, yes, we can design what you need us to design. As far as indoor pools go, starting from big to small, competitive swimmers, they want 50 meter, they want big 50 meter facility. Here's what that would cost. A 50 meter pool tank is 50 meters long by 25 yards with a movable bulkhead is 12,500 square foot. And then when you add the pool deck to that, you add sport spaces, locker rooms, vestibule, the entry, all that, you start to get up to 25,000 to 35,000 square foot, and you get up into a typical cost of say 12 to 15 million for a standalone 50 meter competition venue. And then we threw on expenses.
I might add to that too, now you're starting to get into other features that are related to indoor activities, changing rooms, lockers, things like that normally you may not have in an outdoor facility. So that, again, just cost starts creeping up on indoor facilities like this.
This is one we designed in Lee Summit, Missouri. Their expenses are $425,000. For a facility like that, the cost recovery on standalone competition facilities is not very high. We anticipate it to be around 50%. So where you might expect $425,000 expenses, you might expect $215,000 in revenue. So that leaves you an operating investment annually for a standalone facility. They actually, Lee Summit, their actually revenue's up at 312, and they've managed to push that up to 75%, which is extraordinary. I think I can't find many facilities like this that are operating at that level, but they're really working hard on their programs, creative on their programs, and they've managed to bump that up to get it up to 75% versus typical 50. So then, that's a big one. So what about a smaller one, 25 yards, say an 8-lane, 25-yard facility? The pool area for 8-lane, 25-yard would be about 4,500 square foot. And again, it's about a factor of 3, whatever the water surface area is. The building is 3 times that size. So that's, now we're getting to, $6 to $7 million capital construction and, $270,000 in expenses. Again, for standalone indoor competition pool. And then the downside for just a competitive indoor facility is it doesn't provide much opportunity for just general community use. They usually like it to be deep water and cold, which doesn't go well with your senior aerobics class, and things like that. So what about providing at least a little bit of kind of an attachment to it, zero depth entry, provide some shallow water, at least to have some families, kids in it, maybe birthday parties in that space. So it expands the building pool a little bit and the building area a little bit, expands the price tag a little bit. I don't know if this was the kind of information you're looking for,
The
Yep.
last,
and I wasn't sure. Go ahead.
the one right before that you showed,
Yeah.
what year was that one?
This one was last year, within the last year or so. It's a new facility for the Olathe School District.
Mhm.
So the other part, I wasn't sure if you were talking about building that from the very beginning, like a standalone competition. The other thought is you design it, that you have your outdoor competition area, and what if you design it so it could be enclosed in the future? And we've done that. We actually did that. That was the mindset when we created the layout for Joplin, is this is their museum, and there's a possibility that in the future that the city would take that over, convert that to a recreation center of sorts, or a civic center, and then we position the 50-meter tank close to that, so there's a potential in the future that they can enclose that outdoor pool as an indoor pool in the future. I don't know if they'll do it or not, but it was designed, so that's a possibility. And then this one is in Kansas City, Missouri. It's one of the YMCA's in Kansas City, Missouri. It had a YMCA facility with an outdoor pool, and they wanted to convert that to an indoor pool. So I don't think there was any intention of that happening when it was originally designed and built, but we evaluated it and we helped design, redid the pool, renovated it. That's the existing outdoor pool. It was not in the best shape, but we renovated it and then helped put this enclosure on it. So we're capable of taking, planning for outdoor pools to be converted to indoor. And then there's area supported domes. Does that come up?
Yeah.
People talk about
It did finally come up.
We understand.
A couple of times.
We understand that.
So,
I warned him about that.
we include that. Stuart shared that I think school district just did one maybe for some multi-use facility. When the swimming pool world, it gets brought up a lot because it's a cheap way to do an indoor facility. So that's the plus.
Is air handling a challenge? though?
Yes, there's a lot of downsides to it. The plus really is, there's two pluses, actually. It's the cheapest way to get an indoor pool from the beginning. And the other is, you can take the thing down. It could be an outdoor pool in the summer, you can put it back in the winter. It's not an easy thing to do. It's a lot of work to do that, but you can do that. This one's Johnson County, and I show it. This one's Loren's favorite facility because Johnson County and City of Roland Park shared this facility, and it's operated like this for a long time. And we just completed a study on that, the physical condition and their operating conditions, and helped determine what they want to do in the future. And before it was a partnership between Johnson County and the city. Johnson County's, that contract's done, and it's the city's facility to carry forward, and they're operating at a $400,000 annual subsidy.
While it was operating as a dome facility.
Fully, and so it's like the city need to decide if they want to continue spending that kind of money on it. And I think the end result is they want to convert it to
So
outdoor.
the dome sustained irreparable damage after a storm. They did not choose to continue the dome, and they are no longer operating the dome from here on out. Council has voted on that. So that this is no longer a domed facility.
Is that it now? Where it's the
Yes,
outdoor?
This is
facility?
it, right? They're looking at some other improvements, but yes, as is, if you were to go out, it looks like that now.
So we're neither endorsing nor
It's an
doing
option.
it, but it's an option, but yeah, there's a lot of considerations involved with it. So pros and cons for closed swimming, obvious ones are, you have year-round swimming. It supports wellness and competition programs year-round, which is fantastic. Large events, you can host meets and have large events, which draws people in, community, and that's fantastic. The cons to that, it's a significant, as you can tell, it's a significant capital investment. There are ongoing operation costs, that's an investment on your part. There's typically, if it's a standalone aquatic center, there's a low cost recovery. A lot of facilities try to manage that by connecting it to something that's a rec center or some fitness center, something where you can have membership. You have memberships and membership-driven revenue, which then supports the operation of it.
That's Ankeny, Iowa again. Is
Yeah.
that connected to the other facility that you showed us?
It is not.
It's a
Completely separate.
It's a
This
separate deal.
This is actually a college, city, I don't remember if it's a city partnership with the local college.
I think
Or-
there is a partnership, but I don't remember the exact agreement between the two parties.
So it's an all indoor with recreation stand by itself. So the other challenge is competition pools. Again, I mentioned before, it's a select user group that wants that, and they want deep water and they want cold water. If you survey your community, the majority of the community wants warm water for various activities. So you have that, you kind of have that whole tug of war match between them. If you have just one facility, one tank of water, you'll find yourself in a tug of war match over the thermostat of it. So current trends are to take, if you're gonna do a competition tank, some kind of pool, you're supplementing it with some warm water pools. Recreational pools, birthday parties are a great trend. And then, again, I said connecting to the fitness center. And if you're doing the concept planning, again, that's part of the master planning, concept planning process, is if you want it to be standalone, kind of indoor, outdoor aquatics, it can be all master planned in with everything at that site, with either the indoor stuff being done now or in the future. So any thoughts on indoor pools? Just, I know there's always an interest in indoor swimming. It's a great amenity, but it's also a cost, so it makes it a
Usually comes with a
consideration.
pretty sizable natural gas bill in the wintertime.
Yeah.
Have you looked at any of I was gonna bring that up too, have you looked at any of the geothermal? Is that proving to work or not work, or do we know?
We did geothermal, Waukee, Iowa did geothermal. I wasn't involved with that one, but we did. So there's some specific heater systems that we've used that are not just the conventional gas-fired one, big boiler. And we used some unique, interesting new heaters, and then they used geothermal for portions of the facility. I don't know that it necessarily worked that well applied for the because there's constant demand. Geothermal, I think, works better if sometimes you're drawing heat from it, sometimes you're putting stuff back, where pools are often one-sided. It's always on the take.
So, I think part of what would interest me is more of if we were to go with an indoor pool, having it more of a structural building rather than a dome or something like that, that's hard to remove, and being, what would be incorporated would be some mechanical ability to retract roof,
Yes.
walls, those type of things. And that way, it's outdoor in the summer, and then it's easily enclosed.
That's what this is. I didn't mention this one. There are these systems. These are, they're aluminum structures with panels that either can be glass or these cow wall panels. And that's the idea for those. And then, and up here, those are movable pieces, where the center half of that roof slides down and opens up the top. And then all of these are doors that slide open. So it opens up a little more, so that's a definitely a possibility. The great part is you can open it up. The downside to it is with these systems, you lose R value on some of this stuff, so it adds some heating expense in the wintertime. That's the drawback, or the give and take on it. The big pool, so the question about saving, rebuilding the big pool as is, and we can do that. You have 70,000 square foot, so it's a massive pool, some water sides, a little bit of shallow play area. I just applied, usually the pool structure, like a new modern aquatic center, pool structure and the treatment system of the deck, it's usually at a $250 to $300 per square foot unit cost range. Since we're building all of this, there'll be a lot of economy of scale in building it and then dropping that unit cost down quite a bit to 150 to 200 bucks a square foot, and you still end up with a pretty good capital cost at the end of it, $10 to $14 million to replace that. So that's, I think, what you should expect for the capital cost of it. Interesting, I threw this up. Have you guys seen this? You saw this is I show it, and I'm not gonna tell you that this is where we need to be going. This is something that my partner created, master plan back in 2002, 2003, and it seemed like a good approach then. But as a long time's happened since then, and the conditions changed. But we don't do. The question was asked. You asked the question? Have you built a facility like Big Pool new? And the answer is no. We have not. Surprisingly, so we have not designed a 70,000.
What about any just like bigger, just open bodies of water?
Yeah.
I guess similarly that aren't
We've
more,
done-
that are less of these water park type structures. I think that's more what we're asking
Yeah.
in this, because I think that's what the community's asking
Sure.
of us.
And we've done that, so typically the big water area that's done is 50 meter, that's the typical one, the 50 meter by 25 yard wide, because that's the functional program. You don't do a lot of, like, beyond that, what's the dimension, what's the target you're heading for. We've done some bigger facilities than that were wave pools. Wave pools by nature, like at a water park, are large structures. And so we've done one or two of those that are larger than that. But that's what we've done for single bodies. The actual technical part of designing it would be pretty simple. There's not a lot of stuff to think. Pools get complicated when you start moving the water around and adding stuff to it. So designing it would not be an issue or challenge to design something that's open and large. What we normally do is when we have a facility like that and we want to save part of that or pay homage to something that's older and bigger, is we save portions of it or rebuild portions of it that match or configure with what was there before. We have a couple examples of that. I think that was kind of the intent with this master plan, was to rebuild certain spaces, but it was all done, if you notice, it's the same footprint as the big pool was before. So that was the intent for that original master plan. It's pretty dated now in terms of the amenities and features, but that was the intent of it at the time. The other thing is interesting is, so this is north, and I didn't pick up on this till late. This is north, and this is the current existing parking lot, but they were master planning parking on the east side with maybe entry, saving this building and putting entry on the east side. So that's not something I had considered in those concept plans, but it makes sense that you have ball fields over there, you have parking, you have room. I think the concept plan I showed, I was extending existing parking, which isn't fantastic because it's kind of a nice treed area. given up that by extended parking, so we would definitely want to consider that other side, is that where we would supplement or add a parking program, so a case example of what we do, this is what we did in Shawnee, Oklahoma. It was a 1930s vintage WPA pool, a big oval shaped pool. It wasn't, it's not as big as yours, but it was,
Not
it
quite.
was still, I'm trying to remember, but it's still 30-some thousand. So it's still big. Big.
Only 8,000, isn't it 8,800 square feet?
That was finished. That wasn't this guy.
Oh.
It was much bigger than that originally. But what we did with that is we ended up saving, we assessed the structure condition of it and found that some of the structure was in reasonably good shape. We were able to save the structure and abandon the piping, redo the piping. And what we did, again, this one was a lot of fun because we worked with the community and they wanted something that was different than what other people had. We ended up saving the deep end, and that's what this area is. Of course, back then it was too shallow, so they couldn't have diving on it. So we saved the deep end, and we raised it up by 4 feet to make it deep enough for diving. And by doing that, we made this infinity wall all along there. So this is a big, curved diving basin. That's the original structure. So that was a lot of fun to do that. And it was a 1930s WPA pool that got violated in the 70s. The 70s architecture. So it was, we went back and put it back, we found pictures from the 30s and put it back closer to what its original look was. And you can see there's a picture as original. Here's the construction. You can see these were the new spaces that got built. And then this is the original diving tank with the new wall, the new curved wall there. That was a rendering we had created for it. That's the final result of it. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's different. It's I mean, some of the magic about the big pool is it's not the same as the facility down the road. They say the same thing about this, that it's not. It has modern features to it, but it's not a copy of, say, another facility down the road. So. There's that pool again. One of the fun things about that is every time someone goes off the dive board, flashes the water with that infinity edge, there's a big rush or wave of water that kind of comes over the wall intermittently. So that's a fun part of it. So pros and cons. By continuing to build what you have or replacing it, you continue that unique characteristic that you have now. That's a plus. Honors the legacy and the history of the facility, that's a plus. The cons are it's going to come at a high capital cost to do that. And it will come with high operating expenses, which won't be offset. I don't think you can anticipate the kind of attendance and revenue that you would get by including modern features, like certain features. So you're going to have a little bit lower revenue, and you should anticipate an operating subsidy. So that's, if you completely rebuild it, I think a great concept design challenge would be, as you suggested, how can you design something to honor the legacy and the history? So is it simply that we find portions of the main pool that are kept and are integrated into the concept plan, like we did in Shawnee, Oklahoma? And I guess we have that discussion later. But there are certainly options, things we can do. Splash parks, anything about that? Questions or anything? Okay. Splash parks, yes, so the question was about splash parks, and we, Jeremy paid a visit. We did talk, we did know from coming out that you were interested in splash parks. So we took the liberty of including a couple of splash parks in our design, because we had conversations with you. And I think it's a great consideration. And we do this in a lot of communities where you have a central aquatic center, water park. A mistake for a lot of cities is that they have multiple facilities, multiple small facilities all over the city, and then that just increases increases your expenses because you're not getting that economy of scale. You're not getting that focused program on one facility. And then you have multiple small neighborhood pools that are less interesting and draw less attendance than you would if you had one facility with the things that make it attractive. So with that, you have a central facility, and we haven't done any kind of location study or whatever, so we're assuming, so I didn't mention that, you know, that may be part of this process, I think, that to do a location study or site selection. But for now, you know, everything we've done is considered the big pool as the site, right or wrong. We know it's accepted by the community because it's always been there. So if you're doing that, and this is your only facility, splash parks are a great way to then serve other parts of the city without trying to minimize the amount of expense for capital expense and operating resources. Yes, sir?
Generally speaking, average footprint area square feet for a splash pad or a splash park is?
I'd say typical is, the low end is like 2,000 to 3,000 square foot up to, 6,000 or more. It's kind of a standard number. I don't think there's any, there's no standard for it. You'll find wet decks, splash parks, all shapes, sizes, and forms, and so I don't know that there's a real true formula to that. But that's, if you're thinking of conventional splash parks, we usually see that size. We did find a couple sites that you own that could serve areas that need, potentially could use splash park, and that's the 8th and Emerson site in the Southeast Community Park. Southeast Community Park, I think you shared with me, or maybe somebody else.
Andy emailed it.
It's shared that you've got a master plan for this to become a park, developed park with a cricket field.
Cricket pitch.
Yeah, cricket pitch. We gotta use the right terminology. Cricket pitch. So we got our hands on that master plan. So I think that's already interesting thing I like about that is that's already planned, programmed to be an active park, and it's going to have a restroom on it. It's going to have a playground on it. The splash park is another great amenity that you can add to it, and it doesn't have to be a huge splash park. It could be a smaller size one that feeds everything and adds that kind of uniformity or that extra amenity there, and then it feeds off you can utilize the restrooms. So that's the idea we had for it. Simple circle, not too large. That's 2,500 square foot with a center structure that's kind of the focal point for that with some smaller features around the side. So that's the one we had here. So a nice center structure with some dumping buckets on it and then some smaller sprays around. And I think we had estimated that to be like $400,000 to $500,000. It could be smaller than that. That's a good size, I think, splash park for that park. Certainly could be smaller, scale up or down from there. The other one's 8th and Emerson Park. That one has, I don't think there's a park master plan for it. It has playground space on the south end, a shelter structure with bathrooms, a basketball court, and then this house, I think the house is going away, right? So a little bit different, and character on this one is that our thinking was you have those amenities, again, you're utilizing. A great thing to plan, design a splash park is to connect it with other resources you already have. So by connecting it there, we're going to feed off of that. We would add some parking to it, which could help with parking here. We're connected. We've integrated in, so we've placed it here and then connected to both the shelter and to the playground, so it makes kind of one larger useful park in the process. And with that, the idea that we added a couple of shelters to it, so those could be reservable. Again, the one thing about splash parks is you have expenses with equipment, but you don't have a lot of revenue opportunity unless you put a fence around it and charge 50 cents for the kid to come in, which you could do, but most don't. But you could do reservable shelters, and that's a way to collect some revenue to offset the expense. So,
How long do those take to build?
splash parks are, I'd say 4 months or so. And they don't, the actual construction isn't complex. It's a little bit of piping and a lot of concrete, slab on grade pavement.
Sure.
Some of the time comes with the equipment, depending on equipment. Some of that there's a lead time, like getting a manufacturing item. How long does it take for them to fabricate that and get that out there? So that's where the kind of the variation in construction schedule. But I think 4 to 5 months is reasonable for that. So that was the plan. This one's a little bit bigger. Again, had the structures. So we put a couple of these structures in there, good sized structures that you could rent. And then again, the idea was we were putting a center iconic structure, focal point. That's again another big water feature in the middle, and then a series of smaller features around these hoop sprays. This is a water table that's ADA accessible table where kids can go up and manipulate stuff and affect the water flowing on the table. Just a variety of features. So this was I believe we had a granite sphere where I've seen those where you have the little fountain and there's a big sort of big ball of granite that sits and spins. Seen those? Those are kind of interesting.
What size of footprint was that about?
What's that?
What's the footprint on that one about? You know?
It was 35. That was 3,500 square foot of wet deck area.
Okay.
Do you have it broken out? How much of that was the structures of that cost? You know?
I do. I don't remember. We had a line item as we came up with the cost. I don't remember what those were specifically. So you're ready to cut those out?
Well, I'm just thinking if we had to
Cut
find
back.
a way to
Sure.
get into it easier, we could do one structure. If it's successful, we could add another structure,
Yes.
or whatever the case may be. I'm economic development. It's my job to think about the numbers. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great way. This stuff is stuff you can do with your
Right.
typical resources. This stuff is a little different game. So absolutely, that's a great thought. And we've done splash pads. This one we did. I don't know if you've been to Great Bend. So they have an old, big oval pool, and we had a splash park next to it. And it's a monster. And it was a big interactive play structure on a wet deck next to the oval pool, and then we also had a small little wading pool to it. So that one's been there. I can't remember how long it's been there, but it's been a while now. It was a pretty good investment then. It was at least, I think it was a million and a half. And it's been 10 or more years.
Do you know what the lifeguard requirements are in something like that, since you don't have any open water besides the
That's
shallow?
a good question.
Yeah, we've been digging into this question. Inherently, you would have guards here.
Uh-huh.
In these slide flumes, as of right now, in fact, we've been discussing this over the last few weeks, both with the Red Cross, health departments, manufacturers. As it stands right now, you would need to guard these types of bodies of water. If you have standing water, now general practice is you are gonna have to have a lifeguard monitor.
Per those organizations.
Yeah, per those organizations, each city and each agency is gonna make that ultimate call. Right now, best practices coming from these other agencies, it's that, yes, your certifying body is gonna lead towards, you
Now,
need to staff that.
Now, you did say, were you saying that if you completely fence this and signed it as a swim at your own risk?
That was per Johnson County Health Department. We would need to talk to any, to be honest, I don't know your regulatory body and if you have one. In Johnson County, in that health department, there are some code kind of workarounds if there's a standing body of water to go and no guard on, and there's certain code requirements. We need to dig into it.
And there's two factors in there. One is like, what's your obligation to make it safe?
Is there
for
a
people?
charge for this?
This one is actually connected to the pool, so it's part of.
But they actually pay to
Yeah.
use this portion of it?
Yep, they do.
Yeah, if you don't charge them, Kansas law is that it is at your own, recreation is at your own risk. If it's, as long as it's not an open body, like large body of water.
Yeah.
But
And then this is a partial list of, we've done a lot of splash park design, but interesting, right now we're working for the city of Wichita, Kansas. They are going through all their pools and revamping some. So 6 swimming pools are getting renovated. And then 4 of the pools are getting converted from traditional swimming pools to splash parks. And then they have planning 2 new ones, new sites, and we're involved with that design and that process for them. So pros and cons, I think these are probably all the ones you know. You've done some research on them. A lower initial capital costs, there's a lower operating expense, not having the staffing. Usually the systems are smaller than swim pools, so there's less facility cost compared to a pool. There is appeal, you can, depending upon the design of the splash park, you can get some multi-generational appeal. Cons are you're losing swimming activities in those programs. There's limitations on revenue to actually collect revenue back to try to offset expenses. Most splash parks are purely expenses to operate. A lot of considerations with them. Single pass versus recirculation systems, is that topic you've had or thought about? Traditional thing is if you have a facility like that, you put a filter system, you capture the water, you put a filter system on, treat it, and recirculate it. Those are a challenge, especially the poorly designed ones. Challenge to keep the water clean. There are a lot of issues. We were involved, our company was involved in New York. The state of New York has a state park with the spray ground, and that was a case where hundreds of people got sick with E. coli one year, and they got it from the spray ground and then spread it all over. Everybody left, and it just kind of took it all home, spread it, and it was a big case turned into a class action lawsuit against the state of New York. We worked for the state of New York's behalf, trying to understand what had happened, and as a fact witness for the class action lawsuit that was against them. So managing the recirculated treated systems needs to be done with a great deal of care, especially the design of it. The other thing a lot of cities have gone to, they don't want to mess with the treated systems, so they're going to single pass systems, which means you're trading the expense and effort of treating the water and then taking care of that system to paying the water bill to run it through a single time. So $6 million. Ooh, there's a lot of stuff in it. Can we talk about why you asked so many questions? Is that a good time to?
It won't change anything.
It won't change, okay. So you asked about $6 million facility. What if we had $6 million spent on outdoor pool instead of whatever ungodly amount we put on there for the pools? So that was question number 8, if you're keeping track. We would target, to do that, we would target probably 10,000 to 12,000 square foot of water for that. And this is obviously just initial reaction. We would want to do a cost estimate on the facility we do the concept plan for, but initial thoughts are targeting 10,000 to 12,000 square foot of water, probably considering omitting the lazy river, which may or may not be a deal breaker for you, I don't know. Scale back the interactive play structure. We had a good sized play structure there, scaling that back. And then obviously, it sounds like we all agree is a good plan. Well, no, we don't. No, we don't all agree. But then we consider utilizing the bathhouse.
It's bad, but I agree with you.
So basically a lot of this part goes away. Some of the water slides, we would have water slides in that area. So some adjustments to that plan. This one, I would say this one is roughly what we'd be thinking of. This one's a little bit smaller. This is about 10,000, on the smaller end, 10,000 square foot, but it has some really cool amenities to it. Some water slides, play structure, it's all single body. What it doesn't have is 6 to 8 lap lanes. So this area, to do your $6 million budget, we would expand that. That would be 6 to 8 lane for.
How does that compare to the original pool that was there, size-wise?
The original pool they had was
It's tough.
It's Doinker.
Yeah,
It was little. So
I'm
this
from
one's.
Manhattan, so
Are
I
ya?
know this
Did you
pool.
swim in did you
No, that
sneak
wasn't
over the
mine.
fence at night and?
No, mine was up north. I used Seco. but I
Seco,
didn't have
okay.
pools,
Well, we
so,
did Seco too, since you were there.
I'm just trying to get an idea of size wise.
Well, I think the original one was probably, was it like a four to 6 lane lap pool?
Yeah.
So I think the original one was probably 3,000-ish square foot, and this is 10,000, so.
Okay.
3 times, at least 3 times what was there,
Yeah.
so. And then there's another one similar, this one was in West Des Moines, Holiday. I was telling you about the community has 2 pools. One is the single pool, zero depth entry all the way down to the diving basin, versus the other one that had 3 pools and then a separate leisure pool. This is the one that they don't have, the other pools where they have all the rescues, and this one they don't, even though there's diving connected to the zero depth entry shallow area, because of the, and it's, they attribute it to attribute to the parents paying attention here and not paying attention at the other place. So, pros and cons. Obviously, pros and cons to 6,000 square foot. It seemed probably pretty obvious that you're gonna have lower capital costs, which is good. Your operating expenses will be lower for a smaller facility, but you may not get, you're probably not gonna get what you really want. So you'll have to certainly make priorities and prioritize what's important to you and focus on those priorities. Any thoughts?
I think we're gonna give Jeff a break for at least one slide.
Okay. I'm the talker, I guess.
Okay, so this slide is gonna encapsulate several of your questions, question 9, 10, and 15. So in concept A, or actually in both concepts, we're gonna go through the size, gallonage, very preliminary attendance projection, and also expenses. So on concept A, that is sitting at 18,600 square feet, that is gonna be for that short course lap pool. If you remember, there was an option with an extension to go long course. But the 18,000 is gonna be for that short course with a water volume of 490, just under 494,000 for your water volume. In looking at the attendance, we pulled some operating data from several communities, and as I was digging through that, I realized first year, second year, and average early preliminary projections really did vary. So you're gonna see both in concept A and B that the daily attendance is the same, regardless of which concept here that you're saying you go with, your attendance isn't gonna change. But in the first year, we were really looking at Dodge, as far as what their first year operating data was doing, and they did great, tremendous the first year. So if we were to apply those statistics to you and your population, that puts us at just under 107,000 if we were gonna use that same performance measure. And looking at the
And
year
that's-
two.
and that's based on a percentage of, say, population.
It's based, yes, it's
Not
based
just-
off,
Yeah, sorry.
that's okay, it's based off of population to the attendance, to come up with a ratio. We apply that ratio to you and your community, your exact population here in Garden City. Because we haven't done a full feasibility study yet, we didn't go out 5, 10, 15 and really dig into the particulars behind what your market area is gonna be. As we said, this is a very preliminary projection for you. And looking at Dodge the second year, they did have a decrease in participation the second year, actually by 15,000 reduction from year 1 to year 2. We would need to start to explore what attributed to that. But if we were to take that ratio and apply it to you, we would put you at just under 75,000. And again, we predominantly looked at Dodge to come up with those first and second year projections. When we pulled that out and we looked at 5 or 6 different communities from Iowa, Missouri, Kansas, we came up with an average of just under 51,000 for you. So again, we have started to identify maybe what your minimums and maximums may be on a preliminary basis. Okay, so that's how we came up with those early projections for attendance. On your operational expenses, those are a little bit more predictable, and it's really based off of the size of your facility. So for concept A, just under 366,000 estimated or projected expenses for that concept. Switching over to concept B, the water square footage is a little less. at just under 18,000, but the water volume is more, at 670,000. It's because of this tank. You have a lot of more deeper water here, so although your square footage is less, you have more gallons or more volume in that body of water. And again, attendance is going to remain the same regardless of which concept, with operational expenses coming down a little bit, again, because that square footage came down. Okay. When we think about your market analysis, we typically are going to be, well, we will dig in more in depth to understand the trends and what is going on, look at your population and your surrounding area. We understand that you have a lot of draw from your surrounding communities, and that's one thing we'll work with you on, is to identify what is the nature of that, how far out does that go, so that we can really get a detailed market area for you to dig into those facilities to project more in depth and more accurately for you.
And operational expense, you're looking at everything, that's lifeguards,
Yeah, so it'll take into
chemical,
account,
water, electricity.
She'll write the staffing plan for you if you want.
which I have done, yeah.
Don't
So
write it
yes,
for me,
personnel.
but-
So
I
yes,
just
personnel,
curious.
utilities, a contractual type of services, commodity type of services as well. And those are very, they're pretty predictable based on the size of the facility. And we will talk about staffing.
I'm assuming that's where the savings is in staffing from A to B, because you're treating more water in B.
So staffing is very similar between concept A and B. Staffing
So how are
is
you
not too
dropping your
different.
operational expense if I gotta treat more water?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
So on this projection, again, this is our early level
Sure.
projection. Based on, when we are doing an early projection, it's taking everything into account. As we move forward and get more in depth is when we start to break out line item by line item to be able to give you that answer. Right now, we haven't done that. We haven't said, okay, in concept A, here is exactly your utilities, here it is exactly your staffing. So I don't have a direct answer for you right now because the projections that we're showing on the expenses is based off of square footage.
And they're pretty close, even though you're gonna have a higher volume, there's gonna be a little bit extra, or moving that water and treating that water. But the features, really, probably the features are driving it as much or more as.
Like the annual maintenance costs and
Yeah.
features, okay.
You start adding a bunch of water slides and spraying water
Sure.
all over the place, you're gonna affect your water chemistry, you're using more chlorine, you're gonna have more pumps that you're doing versus, having just a flat water tank that you're filtering water, so.
Okay.
And they're probably, it's an interesting, you brought up an interesting anomaly, they're gonna be pretty close, I think, between the two.
Fair enough.
Yeah. All right. So water treatment, you asked the question, you want to know what, so we haven't concept planned the facility yet, and you're wondering what water treatment system we're using, and the answer is we have not selected any treatment system yet. We tried to assume, it's like pricing and budgeting for typical systems. So it covers a lot of the more conventional systems. If you get into, some of the more automated, more expensive systems, then that would affect, put you at the higher range or even a little bit higher than what we projected. But one of the things about us is we're engineers that are completely independent of any system builder option out there. So when we sit down with you, we're trying to help figure out what's the best system for you guys. And there's not one right system for everybody. Everybody has a different personality, how they like to handle things. So that affects the system that's the right choice for them. And a big example in our industry is we do systems. Dodge is an example. I don't know if anybody's seen their filter room. Dodge has pretty high-end automated kind of systems in place. And the chemical treatment system is expensive. There's that end of it, and it's, some of that stuff is there to really treat the water, and extra insurance on it. Other people would rather have, I want filter systems that are basic and bulletproof and simple, so we don't have an automated system that might, have a glitch and mess things up. So people are often in different camps, whether they like more automated, more sophisticated, and versus simply bulletproof? You got, I don't know if you fall, if you're gonna share which way you fall. Based on what you're running, I'm guessing you're comfortable with the more basic bulletproof systems, because you're not running the, high-end filter and treatment systems.
What is Dodge? Is it liquid chlorine?
It's actually the next gen offline saline generation.
So what's that mean?
Means, you've heard of saltwater pools that people have in the backyard? In a lot of saltwater pools, you put salt concentration, about 3,500 to 5,000 parts per million in the pool, and then you run it through your pipe and put a little juice to it, and it makes chlorine out of it, out of salt water.
Oh, yeah.
So that's how it generates the chlorine. An offline
They're
system,
generating.
offline system, they've got it in the
bleach.
room, and it's generating bleach, it's got its own brine tank, it's generating offline, and then pumping it in. So that's what they're doing. And it's, it's a discussion, because you don't have, so the conventional choices are
Tablets.
tablets.
We're
I'm
familiar with
jumping.
those.
Yeah, so are you using, the most common ones are Pulsar
Mhm.
or Accutab
Pulsar. Or Accutab is what it
is one you're using. So those are the more common options, especially at the size you're using. And you buy those, those buckets are expensive. Cheaper option is liquid, but you have to have a source that's available to deliver it to you.
That was our biggest issue, was the logistics of the liquid.
Liquid
So,
system, yeah. So Dodge went through the same thing, so that
Making their own
offline
liquid.
system is appealing, because then they're not buying it from anybody, they're creating it themselves. It's, so the pluses are, you can do that, you're not buying it from somebody else, you're making it yourself. The downside is it's expensive to buy that system, and they generally don't have a huge capacity, so the systems they have are working hard to keep up with what they
is. They
have.
can be a little touchy too.
Yeah, they're more automated, and they've had some issues. Well, I'll say that they have a management company running their pool, and that management company happens to buy and resell chemicals as well. So they have their own ideas and thoughts and preferences on chemicals, and it's not what Dodge has. So they've got somebody operating who doesn't really want that system. So they have that, and it's also more sophisticated system, so when things aren't working exactly right, it's a little bit more work to figure out what's going on and get it working.
So once it's decided and we, whatever we want to run to keep our water clear and all that, do you guys provide the training and
Yeah.
everything?
Well, we'll spec it out first. What we do, we'll lay it out, all the options. We're not gonna tell you what the right or wrong answer is. We'll lay out all the options and the pluses and minuses, and you'll be a part of that. You'll basically make the decision that works for you based on information we help you get, or we get for you. And we specify that system, and then when the facility gets built, we help you get trained. And it's a combination of us helping train you, and it's also representatives from those systems will come in and train you on those systems as well.
I mean, I think all of them have pros and cons. They all have pros and cons. I mean, I don't know that I would be sold on one or another. I've read up on most of them, and
Yeah. None of them
Good
are
and
perfect,
bad,
and none of them are,
good.
yeah.
Good and bad about all of them.
So that's, the top right, it shows you, two popular tablet systems, the two on the right. Left is the bulk tank for liquid, and then the bottom, that's the next gen system that creates the, and then the filter system, there's the bulk proof option on the left, the good old sand filter. And then on the right is the Defender filter, which is regenerative media, and that's what they have at Dodge. It's a higher end filter system, filters a smaller particulate matter, uses less water, but it's a costly filter to get into when you purchase it at the beginning. And then the bottom is UV treatment to become really popular, to help protect people from the bad bugs, waterborne illnesses, the cryptosporidium and E. coli, and those kind of things. So,
And that can help reduce your chlorine load too.
the guys who sell that say that it does. It all kind of depends in my mind. So UV system can take away some of the demand,
Yeah.
oxidation demand on your chlorine. But when chlorinated water runs through that system, it also eats at your chlorine too. So, you know, you could be taking away a little chlorine, or you could be taking away the things that take away your chlorine. It's, you know, so I don't know. There's not as far as I'm concerned, there's no set black and white that yes, you save money, save chlorine, or no, you don't. So. Enough of the weeds on that one. Life cycle, facility life. So we would expect the facility itself, which we would call the core, the structures and those kind of things, to be at least 30 to 50-year life. And then obviously there are systems that are in there. They each have different various life cycles. You know, chemical feeders, they're usually on the lower end in the life cycle, 10 years or so. And you know, coatings, depending upon, there's different choices of coatings, depending upon what coating you end up with, they have different lifespans. So it runs the gamut. I will say that I threw this picture in here. This is a facility in Marion, Iowa. My partner Dave designed in mid-80s. So it's now mid to late 80s. It's now 35-year-old facility, and I did an evaluation on it, and the structure is fantastic. The facility's really great condition. So we would expect to get that 30 to 50-year life out of a new facility. Is that answering the question? Somebody had that question?
I think it does. I think, as we know, trends change all the time. The ability to change in and out features within the bones of the structure, I think, are what keep things modern and attractive to people.
Well, that's a different discussion, is that my informal analysis of new aquatic centers is I think there's a 7-year life. And when you do a new aquatic center, you peak the interest and the demand for 7 years, and it stays up there for 7 years, and then after 7 years it starts to tail. And that doesn't mean you're losing money after 7 years, but that's kind of rides that wave, and then it starts to tail off from there. So some of these that I showed you are 120% cost recovery, and they have that same pattern. So if they're 120%, and then after 7 years, you know, now it's 115, or it starts to tail off, or whether it's a facility that breaks even, it starts to then go into lower cost recovery. But that just seems to be the human nature, I think, of a new facility, and the interest that people have in it. And then, so then it's a great plan to master plan in, even if it's not expensive things, but you know, whether it's shade structures or certain spray features that after 7 years or so, you can swap those out for something else, and it adds a little bit of life to the facility that helps pique some new interest. And it could be as like when you guys put the Wibbits in, which I think is a fantastic, or not the Wibbits, but the other brand, Aquaglide. Aquaglide is inflatable pieces. That's something that, compared to, you know, water slide or one of those amenities, that's a relatively inexpensive piece, and it probably got you quite a bit of attention when you put that in. So that's a great example of something you're already doing. So, enough on that.
Okay, so question 13, 14, do we consider lifeguard sightlines and the number of lifeguards in our concepts? Absolutely. In any of the concepts we bring to you, we want to be able to start to preliminary plan where staff may go. So because personnel is your number one expenditure line item, and you likely have a limited resource on how many staff you can actually hire and how many can be on duty at a given time, we will go through these, and we have gone through these preliminary staffing plans, looking at the zones of coverage, where they may be located and what they might be able to see. In Concept A, we are showing 16 guards on, and that includes 2 breaks to first aid, with some preliminary zones in which each person would cover. This is not the end-all be-all concept, nor is this the end-all be-all staffing plan for you. And to be honest, I was out of the office when these concepts were created, and I saw them, and I am known as the fun sucker because I'm fairly conservative. Safety's number one with me. And when I started looking at these, we started getting into the conversation about, ooh, you know, we really have to be looking at modification here to potentially bring this staffing number down. And an example of that is the difficulty that happens right in this particular area right here, we already know you're gonna have a challenge right there. So in concept A, we are showing 16 guards, but ranging anywhere between 15 and 17, depending on the weather and how busy you are, that type of thing.
So the moral is Loren should never take vacation.
In concept B, it's slightly more because of the big pool down here, the lap pool. We're showing 18 again, ranging between 17 and 19. But the moral of this story is, for each of our concepts, we are bringing this perspective to you to discuss with you, potentially make decisions based off of number of staff, both for hiring purposes, but also for your bottom line expenditure as well.
Questions or thoughts on lifeguarding, Stephanie? So demo and prep. So we did factor in demo and prep costs into the budgeting we've done. Demo costs, I put roughly $150,000 in demoing the big pool. Demo's a little difficult to estimate because you guys have dealt this when you have facilities demo. The range in what guys charge to do it is all over the board, because it's really based on their estimate of how much time they think they can plow through something. But I did include that much as kind of as the budget for that. The prep work, and when we're doing the budgeting, I put that in unit costs of constructing the shell, and usually that built into that is a certain allowance for reconditioning and some work that goes in to deal with potentially expensive ice oils or things like that. So we have factored those in to the budgeting that we've done. And you asked the question, it's an interesting question to ask now. And is that because of concerns of the cost to demo the big pool? Or is it concerns with soil conditions in the site? Are there specific, I don't know if there are specific reasons to share, or just general interest on what that costs?
Just general interest.
Okay. Gotcha.
Hot button topic, this particular question. So typically in water loss, we would expect to see anywhere between 1/4 of an inch and an inch in a day, due to evaporation, the heat, the sun, the wind, all that. Losing 200,000 gallons a day is not typical. We recognize that. For the concepts we showed you, we wanted to break down what could you expect for typical water loss, evaporation, splash off, kids carrying it out of the pool, that type of thing. We would estimate for those sizes of facilities between 6,000 and 12,000, it being the range, which is significantly less than what you are currently losing, and the expenditure that comes with that.
A little bit of that could be affected by what types of amenities that you have, how much water you're putting up into the atmosphere and things like that, but far less than what you're going through right now.
Does this answer the intent or the thinking behind that question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I like how the question was worded. It said something, what did the question say? And then it wanted to know, the question was,
We are currently losing 200,000 gallons of water a day. Can you speak to that in comparison to other facilities you have designed?
okay, so we have not designed any new pools that 200,000 gallons a day, so you can take comfort in that.
Nobody's had that be their goal.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting.
So,
On the water use, splash pads, single pass, if I'm using the right
Yeah,
terminology.
sure.
What kind of gallons are we talking there?
Good question. You can get up, I mentally had put in my head an allowance of like 100 gallons per minute. Yeah, it's kind of a threshold where I think when you do a single pass, if you're under that 100 gallons a minute, then it seems to be acceptable. You go over that, then it starts adding to, you start getting into 4 million, 5 million gallons used in a season, and then a lot of places don't want to do that. It's an interesting debate because a lot of places we're doing splash pads where you're taking water from the river and you're treating that water and you're putting on a splash pad, and then you're sending it to the sewer plant, and then you're putting it back in the river. But when you're talking to the public about it, it's, so you're wasting that water. You're not really wasting it, you're taking it out and you're putting it back. So in our mind, it really becomes a question of, is how much energy are you spending? You have a treatment plant
A
and
little
you're spending.
different situation here
Yeah.
though, because we're a groundwater.
Yeah,
community.
so you're pulling it out of the ground.
So it's,
And then it goes back, so where does it go when it goes to your treatment plant? Then it goes to
goes to the river.
Then it
river,
goes to
so-
the river.
so there in your
We don't
case-
get it back.
So you're not getting it back, so there, you're taking it out, yeah. So it's important what that, what's that certain situation is, so. So yes, so you would be, a bit above 100 gallons per minute, you easily could be pulling 4 to 5 million gallons out of your groundwater table and putting it into the river. Versus then putting on a treatment system.
That's annually, right?
Yeah, that's usually like kind of for a splash pad, we're talking about not necessarily Memorial Day to Labor Day, but April to 1st of October, so a little bit longer season than say swimming pool.
Still be saving water.
Yeah,
We do that in less than 4 weeks.
yeah, you do, yeah.
Lesser of two evils is still evil, so.
So, anyway, but that'll be,
That's about equivalent to annual water for 83 families and Garden City.
sure 83 families will use the splash park, right?
Well, that's in addition.
But I think they'll
to-
still
bathe.
We'd like to
That's for
think
the
they'll
shower.
still bathe.
Middle there.
Oh, if you
We
get them to
designate
the exchange
executive
showering,
at the-
exchange showering for the splash pad.
So most of the splash pads are just single use, they're not.
A lot of them are going that way because, and that's important, that needs to
Because our
be,
splash pad now is regenerative, it has.
yeah, recycled,
has
and that needs to be an important discussion, because so you have one, so you're maintaining it. I think a big issue with a lot of communities is that they do a splash pad thinking it's a great thing, and it has a lot of benefits, but they're not thinking about the daily effort on it. And it depends on different jurisdictions. There are some areas where health department's really restrictive on that, and they're requiring then that water to be sampled on a regular basis and following that. So then you could end up with a staff person out there a lot testing the water and checking systems, maintaining it. So that's just something that keeps
Stringer
trying to.
baskets, it's outside,
Yeah.
so those stringer baskets have to be checked typically every day. The spills, the food, potential glass,
So the-
visitors overnight,
Yeah.
and so forth.
So the hope is, so if you're kind of just do a simple bulletproof system, type of agency, maybe for a splash pad is something where you start looking at some systems with various bells and whistles where you're getting reporting. So instead of having a person on site testing the water every, few hours or checking the strainer baskets, you're building in some more automated systems that are alerting you, that, showing you what's going on and alerting you what's happening. So it's a consideration, and that it is exchanged for staff time, driving around in the truck, checking things. Okay. Schedule, we had submitted a schedule, and this, of course, I don't know how applicable it would be, but this would be a typical schedule if we started now. If we start now, we did the planning, did the design development, did the construction documents, and started construction. I think your question that you asked here was really about what's it take to build a facility of this size. We think that a good starting, the best case scenario would be giving them 12 months to build a substantial aquatic center water park, like you're talking. You can shorten that duration. We've done it shorter, 8 or 9 months. It can be done. Sometimes you have other parts that kind of you give for that. For example, contractors might charge you. You start tightening them on schedule, their prices start going up. Those kind of things. Or you tighten the schedule and maybe you don't hit Memorial Day. Maybe you go into the summer season a little bit before you get the facility open. So that's the answer to me. I'd say is 12 months is optimum, but you could do less. And you asked, so are you asking the question because of if it's at the big pool, then what's the impact on, if you use the big pool, close it down, and then how does it impact it next year's? So, that ought to be a good discussion. And sometimes the way to manage that is instead of, a lot of times, I'll say communities, the attendance and the interest drops off pretty quickly. It's late in July and early August, so you can manage that a little bit by, say, you might close it a little bit early one summer, and get past your real peak times and then close it a little bit early in order to start the construction process. So you can do things like that to give more time than just the standard, say, 9 months off season. So.
Just real quick before I keep talking, we are just a little over 2 hours. Is everybody okay for us to keep going? Okay, we are getting towards the end here. So you had asked the question, what questions should you be asking? And as we sit back and really start thinking about your project specific to you, there's a few things that kind of rose to the surface for us at this point. So we broke it apart. There's 2 questions that we came up for your general community and 2 questions, if we were you, what you might be asking people on, who would join your team. So for your community, the first question both are related to history, but the first one is, if the pool were to be replaced with a new aquatic facility, how would you like to see the history reflected back into the new design? We understand there's a high sentiment of the big pool and needing to remember and really embrace where this facility and where this community has been. So asking them what that means to them is something that came to the forefront of our minds. And then the second question is, what would you miss most about the big facility if a new aquatic facility were to take its place? And again, both questions are trying to get at, where is the sentiment lying? What really is that about? It's getting more into the psychology behind your psychology of your community versus, what features do you want? Because to gain support and consensus for this project, it's really boiling down to the sense of community that is really surrounding this pool. So those are a few questions that we came up with, and if we were to join your team, that we would want to ask your community specific to you, that we may not be asking another community because it's not as high a priority for them. For your design team who would join your team in this project, we would want to know, are the people that you've seen, are these going to be your team members for the duration of the project? For our group here, yes, who you see and who you've seen, the faces that will be with you now through past when you open up your doors, so we won't do a bait and switch on you. This is who you would be working with in the trenches, every day to get this project done. We feel like that's the best way to get a project done. Trust gets built. I'm going to go back to synergy is there, and now when we have that good foundation, communication gets better, and that's when creativity really starts to come out to give you the best product. And the second question for your design team is going to be, is there additional public engagement recommended? You've done a tremendous job up until this point. From here, again, unique to you is we don't need to go to your general community and say, do you want slides? Do you want shallow water? We know this. You have set that foundation. It's how all the concepts from the teams were able to be brought to you. But from here, yes, public engagement is still going to be important. So the next type of phase is going to be, how are the concepts looking? Site selection and the sentiment behind where facilities may go could be a consideration. The types of activities that they want to do there, now that we have a foundation to build upon. So yes, further public engagement is going to be a priority for you. We're the team to help you do that, and we would support that through materials, through education, potentially being a face on some topics for you. But yes, public engagement should continue from here on out, especially when we think about history and this iconic status. We absolutely want to work with your community so that we can gain consensus, and ultimately, this is their project. So we want to make sure that we're incorporating, their feelings into this project so it's successful. So history, you have some tremendous imagery. I've not seen the volume of images that you guys have. It's really great. So with the history, I've mentioned it a few times. You can progress forward. There's quite a bit here for us to digest and really dig into. It's no wonder your community feels the way it does. Back in the 20s, when this was initially becoming a thing, and Mayor, please correct me if I pronounce it wrong, H.O. Tinkle, is that correct?
I don't remember when.
Correcting anybody when they pronounce it that
We're
way.
gonna go with it. We're gonna
I
go
think
with
it's
it.
You
fine.
never met him?
Of course I did, but I don't remember it being a problem, yeah.
He
I
wanted
do know
to-
that's not how you spelled the newspaper, but his name is fine, I think.
You can dock us points on your yeah, okay, so back then he wanted a hometown project, and since then, since the moment this became an idea, it has been that ever since. So again, no wonder your community feels the way it does. There's no argument there. When the mayor didn't have the funds for it, what did he do? He went right to the community, right? So he goes to the community and says, how can you help us? And the options were, you're gonna bring your horse and your tools, and you're gonna manually help us, you're gonna give us money, or you're gonna give us supplies, and that's exactly what happened. That transitioned into the world's largest free outdoor municipal swimming pool, which changed during the early 2000s when the fees started to be instituted, in which case the title went to World's Largest Outdoor Concrete Municipal Pool. So again, just tremendous amount of history here with the elephants, Moki and Chana, is that right, pronounced right? The boat that was able to get in there, the water skiers that were able to go in there. Again, just the history is really, really unique, and it's not shocking that your community is saying, but this is Garden City. Well, clearly, yeah, this is tremendous. So when the mayor says, suppose we built it with our own hands, that's why your community feels the way it does, because that's what this facility has been for almost 100 years. So there's a lot to digest here. There's more to talk about. There's just more. We're going to go back to the bathhouse. Would you like to speak about the bathhouse?
Well, obviously, that's kind of a hot button with everybody. I mean, when we started talking about the bathhouse, everybody had a opinion on it, and I can probably honestly say that I've been around long enough, probably longer than anybody here. I took swimming lessons at this pool, so that shows you how long I've been associated with this. But I would like to see it.
But not with Mayor Hinkle.
No, I don't remember him. But I would like to see it, utilized in some manner, if that's the desire of everyone here. Like Sam mentioned, the plumbing is shot. You'd have to do some major work if you were going to try to implement, new plumbing back into the facility. But the shell itself seems to be in pretty good shape. It's probably outlasted its lifetime, normally, but it is in good shape. It's been taken well care of, and you've added some things, graphics and things like that to update it to today's standards. And I think it seems like this is a consensus that this needs to be implemented into the master plan, if you will. As we mentioned earlier, though, there's some things that probably aren't feasible to incorporate into that facility right now. That's where maybe, a snack bar and things like that might be able to be better utilized in maybe a newer facility. And when I say a newer facility, there's no reason why we can't design it to be complementary to what you have. We don't normally try to make a building, look older, but in this case, I think it applies to this, and would be good to take that into consideration.
So we threw up just a few ideas of how we might be able to repurpose this facility without getting into the intricacies of the guts on the inside. You do have the Finney County Museum that sits right there. We were just talking in the office casually, and it was, well, could a part of this facility be a museum type element to the history of the pool, and it could tie in over to the Finney County Museum. And that was a different idea that was just thrown out because there's so much that is living in this area. Again, bathhouse, concessions, party rooms, event space, all options for this facility. And even looking at the architectural detail on the outside, is that an element that you like? Is that something to continue forward, even if it were to receive some sort of work? So there's options. options here. And again, Jeff showed the example of the Shawnee, Oklahoma building that was a WPA building. It went back, it had the 70s atrocious, work done to it, and the 30s kind of feeling came back. So again, that was a WPA building, as is this. So additional items to consider when, and I think Jennifer, you might have brought this up in one of your concerns on the concepts, is people are used to a big body of water. It feels, when you walk in, it's very freeing. It feels very expansive. That's a good feeling. People want to feel that. And so in our concepts, and in any concept you choose, that's a feeling to replicate. That goes, and it pays homage to your history and how people feel about it. Is there any way to salvage a portion of the facility or recreate it in the deep end that you saw in Shawnee, Oklahoma? That's an example of doing that. Jeff came up with an idea of even if this facility were to shrink, which you're not going to get 70,000 square feet of water, right? But to do something to mark or indicate where the previous facility was, so there's a visual cue or a visual reminder of what was. I don't have any particular ideas.
Sure, it could be a curb, it could be landscape, just boundaries or borders in the landscaping. There's a number of ways to do that. We've actually done that at a couple of facilities, or planned that in. So I think that would be a great opportunity.
So additional ideas, theming elements or amenities that are specific to you as a nod to the past, colors, signage, like the signage that these two women are standing next to right here, that's a particular font and look. You see that an older style font on your bathhouse right now. I noticed that your rule signs at the pool amenities have, again, similar type of style. You can incorporate those types of things into a new design that still feels like, hey, this is my history right here, and I just get that sense of old times. And you can incorporate that in many ways outside of just features. There's other ways. Animal or nautical themes, which is fairly obvious given your history, but also incorporating the local artists. Mr. Brown, who did your mural on your bathhouse, great way to incorporate culture into this facility, so you can do new things while bringing in your history. And again, going back to offering your special events, you offer tremendous amount of events to get people through the door. So we just came up with a few additional items, again, that are spin-offs of the free admission that used to be, and again, what people used to experience at this facility. So there's a multitude of ways to be bringing this history back in. Some obvious, some not quite so obvious. But again, this is one of the exciting things for this team to work with you on is how to incorporate that.
So I guess this is probably the ending one, right? Ending slide. So questions, why us? We're extremely excited to be invited here and be a part of it. We really appreciated doing what we've been able to do for you in the past. This is exactly the kind of work we do for communities like yourself. We're excited about the possibility of doing something, modernizing it, that's paying homage to the big pool. And we've had some mixed history on that, so experience. So we really would love to do this for you. And I think you would really find us to be a collaborative type group to work with. So that being said, I think, is that it?
No, if you progress.
So that's it. So outside of the questions you had, additional questions? Everybody's
Going once.
either stunned silence or completely worn out.
Probably both.
Been a long day.
Yeah. I can't think of anything I haven't. I don't.
You've done a good job answering our, I think we've peppered you with a fair number of questions.
Yes, that was a first. So you're a city of uniqueness, and I don't think I've been given 20 questions before the interview.
One thing that wasn't discussed a lot, and I'm just looking at on that design there, is the surf machine. What does it take to operate something like that?
It takes
A big electric
140 horsepower pump to squirt water out really fast, 20 feet per second. had, do we have a picture of
Yeah,
it somewhere?
we should, if you go back to the features of concept A.
You know, it's been interesting, um,
There's an up close photo.
Yeah.
there he
There it
is,
is.
right. So it's an interesting thing that, you know, that there have been a ton of new features for aquatic centers. And a lot of them are spray features or water slides, and they all have their kind of unique, interesting, you know, excitement to it. But very few of them have that kind of ability to grow and develop, I guess. So like a water slide, for example, they say water slide, once you've ridden it a dozen times, you know, the 100 times, 200 times is the same experience you had. Diving boards have remained popular throughout the history of swimming pools because, you know, as you use a diving board, you gain more skill and you start trying more things, so it piques your interest and that experience grows with your ability. And this thing here, they sell it with the same mindset. So the first time you ride it, you lay down on your belly and you ride it for a little bit and you're kind of end up off to the side, and then you get a little braver and you
If you're
try it.
Jeff, not
Yeah.
even that quite yet.
I had 6 seconds, 6 seconds standing up, mind you. But yeah, you end up progressing on your knees, and then you stand up, and then you. So the places that have them, you know, you have all the people that use it and kind of fall off to the side, and oh, that was fun, and then you have all your kids. They grab a hold of that thing, and next thing you know, they're professionals, surfers on that thing, and so it kind of gains, it holds their interest, and it creates a whole kind of community and of these kids and adults that are using it. So that's the plus side to it, and you can program things around it. They even offer, they'll have events and competitions that they rotate those around, so you can actually host an event, and then professional surf riders will come in from all over the place. So there's a lot of fun stuff you can do with it. So that's the plus side. The downside is it's expensive initial investment. You know, you're talking $1.5 million to get into the thing, and then it's a massive pump. So there's maintenance involved with it. So that's the downside to it.
The idea came from a, like, 7th or 8th grader or something at Kenneth Henderson. He came up with the initial idea, and then I think he started telling people because it started popping up in the surveys. And then the first, when he started to explain it, we were talking in a group, and I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. He's like, oh yeah, and he actually explained it. Apparently a resort had it, and the resort actually charged them $5
Sure.
every single time they
Oh,
went
so
on it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
And I thought, oh my gosh, how did they facilitate that? But the kid had done it, obviously, at least 100 times maybe. I mean, he was very excited, and he must have started telling all his friends, because then we started seeing it in the surveys.
you had some very creative responses on your survey.
Yeah, yeah. You had to pull out the non-water aquatic stuff, the stuff that was more for like skating rinks or
Yeah.
stuff like that, but.
Yes, so and that's a good point I didn't say, is that like some communities that have it, they do charge. They'll like put wristbands on you, and it's not $5 per ride, but it might be a few extra bucks to ride it versus just getting to the door. So
What does lighting look like on something like this? Because I mean, some of them, you have the pictures, if they're at night, they're pretty proud of their lighting system at night.
yes,
Um,
that's a good question. There's a variety of ways you can do it. A lot of what you see that we've done, communities have gone away from. It used to be that you put lights in the pool shell, and then you supplement it with overhead lighting. And then there's issues. There's been issues with lighting systems and issues with safety and this and that. So a lot of places have gone away from the lights in the basin. So all the lighting happens overhead, and it makes for a pretty bright, to make it safe and be able to see everything, ends up as a pretty bright area. There have been more advancements on lighting with LED and some of that stuff that I think you're seeing more. You can integrate the lights back into the shell again and not be as worried about various safety factors. So you can do that and light the shell and have it be more of a glow and and reduce the overhead lighting, so there's options for what you wanna do, it just kinda depends on what your goals are.
Well, there's
And that's even-
consideration there
sorry.
too, if you're not planning on doing night events at all, you know, that's a consideration and that's a discussion. You know, I've talked to several communities recently where it's, does the capital cost of night lighting outweigh the 2 events I really want to have, but we've never had? And so they're kind of juggling, you know, those 2 things, so that's a consideration for you too, as far as if that's gonna be
Sure.
desired for you.
And it's not necessarily all or nothing too, we've a lot of communities, we've designed a lot of communities where they don't wanna swim at night, but they wanna push it up to the very edge of it, so they'll swim and then they have lighting, more subdued lighting that once, you know, it gets dark, and then you blow the whistle and they're out of the pool, but then that buys you the, you know, 20 minutes or so that it takes to get everybody rounded up and out of the facility as well, so.
Ours is an opportunity to rent the facility. We get calls a lot about renting the entire facility, but our pool's open from 1 to 7. So then the problem you run into is my ability to rent it past that, you know, maybe up to 8:45, you know, they wanna start blowing the whistle to get people out of there, cause it's getting dusk or dark enough that they can't see certain areas of the pool, and so, then someone's like, well, when am I supposed to rent it, at 10 o'clock in the morning, when it's 65 degrees and it's only 70 degrees outside? So we lose a lot of pool rentals because of that, so I think lighting is definitely a factor that we have to consider.
And if you, you go for the new facility, you know, a conversation that does always come up is, I want it to be open past 7 p.m. It's Monday through Friday, I work till 5, I don't get home until 6, I have to eat dinner, the pool's closed, so why am I gonna buy a membership if I can't really come swim? And so I would expect or project that a conversation that's gonna start to come up is, can you stay open past 7? And we hear this over and over again. And in that scenario with the pool rentals, it could be, well, now the pool doesn't shut down until later, and now it's even later that someone could rent the pool. So, yeah, that's a consideration too.
I think that's it. Guys, do you have anything else? Okay.
Thank you for your
Again.
Thank you. We